Have you ever felt, whether recently or sometime in your life, an intense, almost inexplicable connection with someone? Those looks that say everything, the emotions that arise without warning, the overwhelming sense that someone was meant for you. But let me ask you something more difficult. What happens when that connection isn't mutual? When everything you feel is real, raw, and consuming, but the other person doesn't choose you in the same way? Here's a hidden truth that few are willing to face. A psychological trap uncovered by Carl Jung, the revolutionary mind who decoded the human unconscious. A dangerous pattern that explains why men sometimes obsess over women who reject them only to lose interest once their love is returned. This cycle is silently shaping relationships right now, whether you're aware of it or not. If you're single or in a fragile, unstable relationship, what you're about to hear may spare you years of emotional pain and confusion. Because around 90% of women will go their entire lives without ever learning this powerful truth, a subconscious pattern that holds the key to their romantic destiny. And this isn't just another recycled piece of dating advice. This is the deepest truth no one has the courage to tell you. The man who seems madly in love with you today may not be loving you at all. He may be projecting a psychological phantom onto you, a shadow of his own making. And when that illusion fades, so does his affection. Here's the part that's hardest to accept. The more intensely he falls in the beginning, the more likely it is that you're not being loved for who you are, but for who he imagines you to be. Without understanding this, you risk repeating a painful cycle, the euphoric beginning, the emotional high, the inexplicable withdrawal, and finally, the collapse. Every day that passes without this knowledge is a day you let unconscious forces govern your love life. But now, you have a chance to change that. Carl Jung, one of the greatest minds in psychology, uncovered a fascinating and unsettling truth about the male psyche. He revealed a cycle of attraction and abandonment, rooted in the primal longing for mystery and challenge. This is what compels men to chase what they can have, only to turn away once they do. And it's not a flaw in character, it's a flaw in awareness. Today, you can begin to see what most never will. We'll explore the 5 psychological mechanisms Jung identified each one, peeling back a layer of the mystery behind this destructive romantic dynamic. By the end, you understand why your most intense connections may have fallen apart, and how to stop the pattern before it repeats again. Mechanism 1. The projection of the anima. The ghost in the mirror. Jung discovered that every man carries within him a hidden image, an unconscious feminine ideal he called the anima. This archetype shapes his deepest feelings of love and attraction. But here's the disturbing part. When the woman pulls away, she becomes a blank canvas for this projection. Her absence creates a vacuum, a psychological space that the man fills with fantasy. He doesn't see her clearly anymore. He sees an idealized version of her, constructed from his own longing, pain, and imagination. And the more unavailable she becomes, the more powerful the projection grows. He's no longer chasing a person, he's chasing a phantom, a ghost that reflects his own unmet needs, a love that was never truly real. Can you see now how this creates the perfect psychological trap? Here comes the first painful secret one that 99% of women will never discover. When a man becomes intensely enamored after you pull away, he's not falling in love with you. He's falling in love with a phantom, a psychological ghost he's projected onto the space your absence created. It's a fantasy, not a connection. A mirror of his own desires, not a reflection of your truth. And when that illusion inevitably shatters against reality, the same man who once seemed obsessed disappears. Have you ever asked yourself why this happens? Why do so many men chase a woman with passion and persistence only to grow distant, disinterested, or even cold the moment they finally have her? What invisible force is at work here? What unconscious pattern could explain this contradictory and devastating behavior? Jung answered this with unsettling clarity. When distance fades, The projection collides with reality hard. And in that collision, the enchantment breaks. Think deeply about your past relationships. How many times did you sense, even if you couldn't explain it, that a man wasn't truly in love with you, but with some idealized version of you that only existed in his imagination? Now ask yourself, what would your love life look like if you could recognize this pattern before it had the chance to destroy something real? Mechanism 2, emotional scarcity. When the unavailable becomes irresistible, here comes the second revelation one that will challenge almost everything you've been taught about male attraction. Jungian psychology reveals a primitive, irrational reflex in the male mind, something so buried in the unconscious that most men would never dare to admit it. When a woman becomes emotionally unavailable, she triggers an ancient circuit in the male psyche, one that equates scarcity with value. The rarer the presence, the higher the worth. This isn't conscious, it's primal. And this is why a woman who is always available, who offers love openly and consistently, can tragically be perceived as having less value, while the woman who maintains emotional distance becomes the most coveted prize. It's not fair. It's not even logical, but it's real. And ignoring it could cost you years of needless emotional pain. Be honest with yourself. Have you ever found yourself hopelessly drawn to someone who barely acknowledged your existence, while overlooking someone who showed you kindness, presence, and care? What does that say about your unconscious programming? Let's imagine something. You meet two people. One is warm, open, affectionate. The other is elusive present one day, distant the next. Unpredictable, unattainable. Which one awakens more curiosity in you? Which one leaves you wondering, wanting, needing? Now ask, why? Why is our psyche wired to crave rejection, to value absence over presence? The answer lies deep within the collective unconscious, a pattern so entrenched that most people will remain trapped in it forever, unless they discover the next secret. Mechanism 3, the archetype of the unattainable maiden. The mythological trap. Here's the third truth one that touches something ancient in all of us. Jung uncovered a powerful archetype embedded deep in the male psyche, the unattainable maiden. This isn't a metaphor. It's not a theory. It's a primordial force, and it's dangerous. When a woman pulls away, she unintentionally awakens this archetype. She becomes more than a person. She becomes a symbol, a myth. And in that moment, the man enters an altered state. He stops responding to you, the real woman in front of him, and starts chasing a dream, an archetypal image promising spiritual completion. Are you starting to see the danger? The love feels divine, the connection, cosmic, the intensity, overwhelming, but it's not built on truth. It's built on myth. That's why so many men say, I've never felt anything like this before. You make me feel whole. You're the one. But how long did that magic really last? Because here's the tragedy Jung revealed. Many men aren't seeking you, they're chasing the lost pieces of themselves. And you just happen to mirror those missing parts in the moment they met you. This is why the most intense, intoxicating relationships often end in silence, confusion, and heartbreak. So ask yourself, would you rather be adored as a fantasy and forgotten, or truly seen and loved for who you really are? Mechanism 4, the shadow pattern. The wound seeking the blade. This next revelation may be the most unsettling yet. Jung described the shadow as everything within us that we repress, deny, or fear. And when a man becomes obsessively drawn to a woman who distances herself, it often isn't love. It's a confrontation with his own shadow. His deepest fear that he's not good enough, not worthy, not lovable, gets activated by her rejection. And instead of walking away, he becomes addicted. In Jung's words, the shadow seeks not healing, but repetition. Like a wound searching for the same blade that cut it. And so the man chases the very person who makes him feel inadequate, believing that if he can win her, he'll finally prove his worth. But it never works. It only reopens the wound again and again. Have you ever noticed how men with low self-worth seem most attracted to women who reject them? This isn't weakness. It's not desperation. It's the shadow calling him to face the one fear he cannot name. Until he integrates that shadow, until he makes peace with his own pain, he'll keep chasing the one woman who confirms his worst belief about himself. And both of you will suffer. But there's a way out. Mechanism 5, the individuation cycle. When you become the mirror, at last, we reach the final and most transformative insight Jung ever revealed. Individuation, the journey to becoming whole. For a man, this often begins with a desperate need to integrate the inner feminine, the anima. And paradoxically, when the woman pulls away, something profound happens. She becomes a mirror reflecting back to him the unacknowledged feminine within himself. She doesn't just awaken desire, she awakens transformation. But here's the paradox. If the man isn't ready to face his inner world, he won't grow. He'll project. He'll cling to the illusion, fall in love with the image, and flee once reality shatters the mirror. But if he is ready, if he begins the work of becoming whole, that projection becomes integration. The illusion gives way to truth. And from that truth, real love can begin. So now the question becomes, will you continue living in the shadow of other people's projections? Or will you begin seeing clearly both in others and in yourself? Because only when you see through the illusion can you begin to write a different story, one not built on fantasy, but on freedom. If you don't understand this mechanism, you risk becoming a character in someone else's psychological story, a mirror in a play that was never truly about you. This dynamic creates a devastating paradox. The more a woman preserves her mystery and emotional distance, the more she becomes a canvas for a man's unexplored inner world. He isn't consciously aware of it, but what he's truly seeking isn't you. It's a reunion with the forgotten parts of himself. So ask yourself, honestly, are you being loved for who you truly are? Or are you being used as a mirror in someone else's journey towards self-discovery? And now comes the most surprising revelation of all. This same mechanism works in the opposite direction. Yes, you too may be projecting. You may believe you've fallen in love at first sight, when in fact, what you're seeing is your animus, your inner masculine archetype projected onto the man before you. What feels like an intense, undeniable attraction. It's often the surfacing of your own unconscious masculine potential manifested in someone who, for a moment, reflects what lies dormant within you. Now that you've seen these deeper psychological patterns, these truths unearthed by Carl Jung himself, we've arrived at a transformative moment in this journey. Here's something that most relationship experts won't even touch. Something they won't write in books, won't mention in podcasts, and almost never speak aloud. The emotional tension you felt building throughout this explanation wasn't accidental. It mirrors, exactly, the emotional arc that unfolds during a psychological projection. Right now, you are living the same emotional pattern that may have silently shaped your most intense and most painful relationships. So how can you know if it's happening to you? Here are the 5 unmistakable signs that you are being used, not knowingly, but unconsciously, as a projection screen for someone else's inner world. Let's see how many you recognize from your past or present relationships. 1. Excessive idealization, the hidden trap. He begins attributing to you almost supernatural qualities, as if you were sent from another world. You hear phrases like, "I've never met anyone like you. You're not like other women. It's like I've known you my whole life." Sound familiar? The intensity of his idealization grows precisely when you remain emotionally distant. And here lies the cruel psychological truth. He's not seeing you, he's seeing a ghost, a projection he created in your absence. one you can never live up to. 2. Growing obsession with rejection. Notice this dark and repeating pattern. The more you pull away, the more he leans in hard. The texts increase. The declarations of love become theatrical. The gifts arrive unexpectedly. The intensity becomes overwhelming. But none of this is about genuine connection. It's about maintaining the fantasy. His obsession is not with you, but with what your rejection awakens inside him. This is the most dangerous phase, where infatuation morphs into possessiveness. 3. Magnetic attraction to mystery. Like a moth drawn to a flame that would destroy it, he becomes inexplicably fixated on the parts of you he can't understand. He's not curious about what you openly share. He's enthralled by what remains hidden. He forms elaborate fantasies about your inner world. He reads between lines that were never written. He projects entire histories and meanings onto glances, silences, or subtle gestures. What is he really seeking? His own shadow reflected back in the mystery you carry. 4. Almost mystical transformation. He looks at you as though you've awakened something dormant. With a trembling voice or feverish intensity, he says things like, "You've changed my life. I feel completely alive around you. I don't know who I was before I met you." He describes sensations of euphoria and transcendence. He is, in effect, intoxicated. Not by you, but by the altered state of consciousness the projection has created. This isn't true love. It's a spiritual experience born of fantasy, not of knowing. 5. Collapse and disillusionment. Though not yet spoken, this is always the final act. When the illusion fades and it will, you'll feel him drift. Suddenly, the passion cools, the tension vanishes, the distance returns, and you're left wondering, what changed? What did I do wrong? The answer is nothing. You didn't change, the illusion dissolved. He wasn't falling in love with you. He was falling in love with the parts of himself he hasn't yet claimed. And now, they've returned to the unconscious, leaving you behind like a symbol in a forgotten dream. So now the final question becomes, will you keep confusing projection with love? Or will you choose to see clearly, courageously, and consciously? Because true love doesn't idealize. It doesn't possess. It doesn't vanish. True love begins only when the mirror shatters, and you both stay. It is a manifestation of archetypal projection, working at the most primitive levels of the male psyche. And now we arrive at the inevitable collapse, the final, most devastating sign. Once the distance vanishes, once he finally wins you, his interest fades like mist evaporating under the morning sunday. The intensity dissolves, the enchantment breaks, and worse still, he may even feel an unfamiliar sense of repulsion. The cruel truth is revealed. It was never you he desired. It was a projection, the illusion crafted in the empty space you left behind. Are you ready for the final revelation? One that could forever change the way you experience love? Because now, at the culmination of this journey through Jungian psychology, you hold a truth most people will never even glimpse. The paradox of distance and attraction isn't a dating tactic. It's a deep, primal mechanism etched into the male collective unconscious. Understanding this doesn't just give you insight, it gives you freedom. This is a peak of emotional intelligence. A rare moment when something invisible becomes visible and once seen can never be unseen. But here comes the turning point you've been waiting for. This isn't about manipulation. This isn't about playing games. Understanding these dark psychological dynamics is not a weapon. It is a liberation. Because once you learn to recognize projection, it loses its power over you. You stop asking, what did I do wrong? You stop blaming yourself for someone else's unresolved wounds. You stop mistaking fantasy for love. And now, the final revelation, the truth that changes everything. The real power of this knowledge doesn't lie in using distance to provoke desire. It lies in recognizing the exact moment you're no longer being seen for who you are, but for what someone needs you to represent. That's where your freedom begins. Because true, transformative love can only arise when we see each other not as archetypes, not as ghosts, but as complex, imperfect, breathing human beings. Imagine building a relationship where you are not idolized or objectified, but truly known. Imagine no longer being a screen for someone else's unconscious fantasies, but instead becoming fully visible, fully present, fully yourself. The most powerful question you can ask is not, how can I use this knowledge to attract someone? But rather, how can I transcend these ancient patterns to build something real? Because once you stop being a mirror, once you refuse to be the fantasy, that's when love, the kind that endures, begins. What you do with this knowledge now will shape the future of your relationships. This is your choice point. Your chance to stop reliving the same patterns. This insight goes against nearly everything taught in mainstream dating advice. It's not a game, it's psychological truth. And it has the power to save you years of needless emotional suffering. But only if you act before these unconscious forces quietly take the wheel again. You've just been given access to rare wisdom. Wisdom that's kept out of reach for most women because it reveals an uncomfortable truth. That much of what we call love is just ancient psychology, repeating itself in different costumes. Right now, countless women are still trapped, caught in a cycle of idealization, abandonment, confusion, and pain. They lie awake, wondering, why did he chase me so hard? Just to leave me once he had me. But you're not in the dark anymore. You've seen the map. The window for transformation is narrow because the unconscious is always trying to reassert control. If you recognize any of the 5 signs in your past or present relationships, then what you've just learned could save someone else from years of heartbreak. So here's what I want you to do next. Share this message. Send it to someone who desperately needs it. Someone you love, someone who's hurting, someone still asking why. This may be the wake-up call that changes their path forever. Look back over the map of your romantic history. Which of these 5 dangerous signs of anima projection surfaced again and again? Was it excessive idealization, the sense that he saw you not as you are, but as something almost divine? Was it the obsessive pursuit after rejection, those frantic attempts to win you back just as you pulled away? Or perhaps it was the mystical transformation, his claim that being with you changed everything, made him feel reborn? This is not a theoretical exercise. This is a lifeline, because the insight you now hold could spare another woman from years of confusion, pain, and self-doubt. So take a moment, be brave. Share your experience in the comments below. Your story, your courage might be the light that helps another woman escape the same unconscious trap you now recognize. You never know who might read your words and finally wake up. Links. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications to receive the next episode in this exclusive Jungian psychology series. In the next installment, we'll uncover the most dangerous male archetype, the one every woman unconsciously projects onto men, and how this hidden force may be sabotaging your relationships before they even begin. This insight could be the final key you need to break free from the repeating cycle of painful, unfulfilling love. But be warned, this psychological wisdom won't remain available forever. Join the growing community of women who have awakened to the unseen patterns shaping their romantic lives. Your future self will thank you for taking this one small step today. Links. And what if I told you something that few psychologists will ever say out loud? That the intense obsession a man feels when you pull away has nothing to do with you, and everything to do with the wound of his inner child. A wound he's unconsciously trying to heal through you. This is the revelation that will fundamentally change how you interpret male behavior, and more importantly, free you from taking his reactions personally. Carl Jung discovered a profound truth that many therapists avoid, perhaps because it is too raw, too honest, too difficult to confront. When the man becomes obsessively attached to a woman who creates emotional distance, he is not truly in love. He is trying to rewrite his earliest emotional trauma. It begins in childhood. Every boy must one day separate from his mother, a psychological weaning that is necessary for the formation of his masculine identity. But this separation, however natural, always leaves a wound of longing, a hunger for the perfect, unconditional love he once knew in her arms. Linksman, now here is the mechanism that transforms everything you thought you knew. When you pull away emotionally, intentionally or not, you activate that ancient maternal wound. His sudden obsession is not about you. It is an attempt to relive and repair the original rejection that shaped his psyche. The more you pull away, the more you trigger his abandonment wound, and the more he pursues you, not out of love, but out of survival. This creates a destructive cycle. Chase, momentary connection, withdrawal, repeat. And here lies the paradox. The moment you become fully emotionally available, the tension disappears. The wound no longer echoes. And so, his interest vanishes. Have the courage to reflect. In your past relationships, did the man with the deepest childhood trauma become the most obsessed with you when you created distance? That's no coincidence. It is the wounded boy within the man, desperately trying to heal the first rejection he ever felt. Lenses. Few understand that this cycle of psychological pursuit and withdrawal becomes more than emotional, it becomes chemical. The neurochemical cocktail released in this cycle. Dopamine during pursuit, serotonin during connection, cortisol during rejection, creates a psychological addiction stronger than any drug. It can last for years, even decades. And if left unrecognized, it will define a person's entire romantic life. So ask yourself gently, but honestly, in your current relationship, are you unconsciously playing the role of his rejecting mother figure? Are you caught in a cycle that can never lead to healthy love? And now comes the most uncomfortable truth of all. Many women sense this dynamic, not consciously, but intuitively. And some learn to manipulate it. They withdraw love to provoke pursuit. They mirror the mother's absence to remain desired. They withhold affection to keep the tension alive. But this manipulation comes at a terrible cost. It traps both partners in an emotional reenactment of pain, ensuring that true intimacy can never fully bloom. It ensures that the relationship remains trapped at the level of neurotic attachment, never evolving into genuine love. But now we've arrived at the most transformative point in this entire journey. The moment when knowledge becomes power. Power to create true, lasting change in your relationships. Everything we've uncovered leads to one critical, life-altering question. How do you break the cycle of projection and rejection? How do you build an authentic connection rooted not in fantasy, but in reality? Carl Jung offered an answer so profound, so quietly revolutionary, that is rarely spoken of in traditional relationship advice. The path forward begins with something deeply counterintuitive, not seeking another to complete you, but integrating the masculine and feminine energies within yourself. This is the path of individuation, the sacred journey of becoming psychologically whole. When you embark on this path, you stop seeking completeness through others. You stop projecting your unclaimed parts onto lovers, hoping they'll make you whole. Instead, you become whole within yourself. It begins with a radical act of courage, recognizing and withdrawing your own projections. Every time you feel that sudden, magnetic attraction to someone, ask yourself, am I truly seeing this person for who they are? Or am I projecting my inner animus, the idealized masculine within me, onto them? Because the uncomfortable truth is this. Projection works both ways. Just as men project the anima onto women, women project the animus onto men. That breathless sense of he completes me is often nothing more than the outward projection of your own disowned masculine traits: strength, structure, clarity, direction. Qualities you haven't yet integrated, and so you fall in love with them in someone else. But here comes the most powerful revelation of all. When you withdraw your projections, when you consciously integrate your inner masculine and feminine, something profound shifts. You become psychologically whole, and that wholeness creates a completely different kind of magnetism. No longer desperate, no longer chaotic, no longer born of need, but instead a natural, grounded attraction between two sovereign, authentic beings. Not mirrors, not fantasies, not ghosts, but real people. Carl Jung called this sacred inner union the 空因球, the alchemical marriage of opposites within the psyche. When you achieve this internal harmony, your relationships no longer repeat the old patterns of neurosis. They become conscious choices, not driven by longing or fear, but by deep recognition and mutual respect. You no longer need someone to complete you. You choose someone to complement you. And this doesn't mean rejecting your feminine essence. It means owning all parts of yourself, your softness and your fire, your intuition and your logic, your vulnerability and your strength. No longer disowning parts of yourself, no longer outsourcing them onto someone else. Here's a paradox few people ever truly understand. True intimacy only becomes possible when you no longer need it to feel whole. When you become complete in yourself, you stop looking for saviors and start seeing people as they truly are. Imagine how your love life would change if you approach every connection from this place of wholeness. No more illusions, no more hidden contracts, no more silent expectations. What would happen if you saw others for who they truly are? And they saw you not as an ideal or projection, but as a complete, complex, living human being? This is the ultimate liberation that Jung psychology offers. Freedom from the unconscious forces that have shaped human love for millennia. It's the difference between being driven by projections and consciously choosing connection rooted in reality. And so the final, most powerful question is not, can I be loved? But, can I love beyond projection? Can you remove the fantasy and face the imperfect beauty of another person in all their flawed humanity? That is the challenge. That is the reward. That is the essence of a conscious relationship. We have now reached the point of integration where every thread of this Jungian journey converges. You now hold a knowledge that most people will never discover about the hidden forces shaping your romantic life. But the real transformation begins not with knowing, but with what you choose to do with what you now know. Will you use it to manipulate, to provoke obsession, to play with distance, to control outcomes? Or will you use it to liberate yourself and those you love from the ancient, unconscious cycles that have ruled relationships for generations? Jung believed that consciousness was the highest moral act, that to bring light into the dark places of the psyche was an ethical, even spiritual endeavor. What you've done by following this journey is not just psychological, it is sacred. And now, the rest is up to you. The knowledge you now carry holds more than insight, it holds ethical weight. This is not just information, it is revelation. And with it comes the most decisive choice of all. Will you continue participating in the ancient dance of projection and rejection, now with the power of awareness in your hands? Or will you step outside this ancestral pattern entirely and create a new relational paradigm? One built not on illusion, but on the courageous act of truly seeing and being seen. The first path may offer fleeting control, a sense of power, a seductive edge in the game of attraction, but it comes with a cost: the certainty of long-term disconnection, the slow erosion of intimacy. the ache of being adored but never truly known. The second path is not easy. It demands the abandonment of familiar scripts. It requires you to surrender the comfort of projection and instead walk a new road, one of self-integration, one of presence, one of authenticity. Yet on this path lies the only kind of love that can last. Imagine a world where relationships aren't built on fantasy, but on conscious recognition, where love deepens, not fades over time, where passion is not a flash in the dark, but a steady fire sustained by mutual truth. This is the vision Jung's psychology opens before us. Not just better relationships, but a more integrated, evolved humanity. And here is the deepest truth I can leave you with. The strength, the wisdom, the love you once searched for in others. The qualities you projected onto your lovers. They have always lived within you, waiting to be seen, reclaimed, and integrated. Your wholeness does not lie in finding the perfect person to mirror back your lost parts. It lies in recognizing that you are already whole. This is the sacred marriage Jung spoke of, not merely the union of two people, but the reconciliation of your own inner opposites, your masculine and feminine, your shadow and light, your longing and your truth. So now, I ask you, one final time, what will you do with this wisdom, this rare psychological insight that most will never discover? Will you remain in the old cycle of idealization, obsession, and inevitable abandonment? Or will you use this knowledge to step into something revolutionary? A new way of loving, a new way of being, a new way of relating that begins with the self. Because the decision you make now will shape not only the quality of your future relationships, but the very evolution of your emotional life. Most people will return to the unconscious pattern, to the comfort of familiar pain, to the temporary high of projection, followed by the sting of disillusionment. But I don't believe you will. I believe you are different. Choose consciousness. Choose reality over fantasy. Choose freedom over familiar pain. And never forget, the same psychological forces that once bound you can now become the foundation of your liberation. The power has always been within you. Carl Jung simply showed us where to look. I came par. Now it's your turn to see.